Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, this very special episode of Midnight Double Feature. On this episode, as you can see, we've got the creator of Clickbait, Netflix's Clickbait, Tony Ayres. Tony was an amazing interview. I had a lot of fun with this. He was such a kind and gracious person. He responded to my questions really well. You wouldn't be able to tell that he had just had a hand in creating one of Netflix's most famous TV shows of all time, which is no small feat. So, look, thank you so much for Tony. This was a great conversation. I really appreciated this. Thank you so much to you guys for supporting the show. That's the only way. That's the only reason we're able to have people like Tony on the podcast. What I am going to do before we kick off this episode is plug our Patreon. Our green room members know all of the bonuses that they get by supporting the show. It's only $5 a month. There's no bells. There's all the bells and whistles, but there's no like hidden fees or anything like that. And you get a whole bunch of episodes. A few episodes. Well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and just speed read through the bonus episodes because this is kind of what's locked behind our green room wall where our members get to party. So we've got an episode on The Mummy. We talked about movies we bailed on. We talked about Daredevil 2004, remaking our podcast. That was a really good one because we kind of went through and talked about podcast episodes that we kind of want to have a second go at. We talked about Child's Play 2, the Batman Arkham games, Freddy vs. Jason, House of Wax. We reminisced about the good old days. We talked about Reservoir Dogs, The Dead Zone, Marvel's The Avengers, Final Destination 2, Double Dragon, movies we own and why. We got the holy shit. I completely forgot about this, but we talked about Paranormal Activity. That's crazy. But also top 5 of 2020, The Fugitive, Slither, Darkness Falls, remakes we want with special guest Josh from LSG Media. Thank you so much, Josh. Saw, Pitch Black, movies we'll never watch again, which was fun. Favorite films you've never heard of, with special guest Matthew Anderson, again from LSG Media. Thank you so much, Matt. We talked about Scary Movie, the OG. We talked about our favorite comfort movies, Carrie, Evolution, Halloween, and ghosts and stuff in honor of Halloween right now. But I mean, look, with these interviews, you can also find video versions on our Patreon. I don't like showing my kind of ugly mug to people that I don't know. So people that I do know, people that do support us, are more comfortable with that. So you guys can check out the video interviews. But look, please support us. Head to patreon.com/Midnight Double Feature to help us do that. It's again $5 a month. It helps us out a lot. We're an independent podcast. We don't do advertising. We don't do sponsorships. So it helps us out a lot. So thank you so much, guys. Again, here's our interview with Clickbait creator Tony Ayres. Hope you enjoy. Mr. Tony Ayres, congratulations on Clickbait. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Midnight Double Feature. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Yeah, just in extended lockdown in Melbourne, as we all are.
Oh, don't get me started. I mean, I've seen, I keep getting the notifications of Victoria's cases, and it is scary. We just opened up here today in New South Wales. We're out here celebrating, but I mean, you guys are friends to the south. It's terrible. It's a terrible time. I'm so sorry to hear.
Yeah. I guess everyone's just trying to work out how to navigate this completely new world that we didn't even sort of have any inkling of 2 years ago, and suddenly we're thrust into it.
Absolutely. It's a strange and difficult time, but look, something that's come around that has totally helped everyone in this difficult time is clickbait. I really want to. I mean, clickbait. Okay, clickbait's amazing. Let me just go ahead and I loved it. I enjoyed it from start to finish. It was just one of those things that we were just so dialed into. When I say we, my girlfriend and I, we were just dialed into, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, without sugarcoating it. It was the most viewed series on Netflix in the US in September. It was one of the most watched Netflix series in the UK, and the fourth biggest show globally. So, we've a little bit behind the scenes. You and I have rescheduled a couple times. This meeting was supposed to happen a bit earlier, but I like that we're coming into it after now because I'm able to throw those stats at you. And it's actually kind of a relief because now we can examine the success of the show. So when you were putting the show together, you're a co-creator, you're working with somebody, you're working with a team. Did you guys ever think that it would be the hit that it became, this big juggernaut?
Absolutely no idea. We just wanted to try to make something that we thought was cool and engaging, that sort of had a message that was complicated and interesting, and and we got told by Netflix they wanted something kind of fast and propulsive and bingey, so we were just kind of that was the show that we made, but we had no idea of what kind of outcome. I've been working for a long time. I've worked for 30 years, and you never really know what's going to happen when a show goes out. You hope for the best, and you've got some sense of what a chance it might have, but you never really know.
No, absolutely. I find it interesting that so Netflix approached you. I mean, usually, you usually have writers who are kind of like shopping their idea around to different different studios. So
no. I had to pitch it to Netflix. I pitched the idea to Netflix, and they really liked it and picked it up. But then they told me that they wanted the version of it that I made to be really propulsive and really kind of hooky. So and that sort of was fine by me because I like that kind of stuff.
No, it absolutely was, and it's so enjoyable in that way. And this kind of ties into a question that I have later, but I'm just going to bring it up now. So, I wanted to ask you about kind of like Netflix's distribution sort of model, how they just drop the entire season at once. And Clickbait's premise is, ultimately built on kind of finding out who may be responsible for everything that's happening. It really lends itself to those water cooler conversations. So I wanted to ask you whether you think making every episode available at once is better than the week by week style and how it's more effective.
I mean, I think, when you work for Netflix, you just have to take it. That's the way, that's their model. So, I just kind of accepted it. I guess, the thing that was, tricky for me was this, the fact that there are so many spoilers on the internet, and
Twitter is a thing. Twitter is
yeah. And I generally sort of am not, I don't really spend very much time on Twitter at all. But I did notice that when the show came out and it was super exciting and it was all kind of happening, I did get on Twitter to have a look, and it was just one spoiler after another. So,
oh boy.
And I guess that's just the nature of it, and you just kind of have to accept. And most people aren't on Twitter. That's the thing. So, so you also have to remember that. Yeah, I mean, the week by week thing has its strengths. Things. It makes it more like appointment viewing, event TV, that kind of thing, and more water cooler. Certainly they're the things you lose when it's all dropped. But then, the other thing about our show was that it's super bingeable. And the number of people who have told me that they watched all 8 episodes in, one sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like I personally, I could never do that because that's just not, I just don't seem to have a life that allows that. But it was, people like to do that.
No, absolutely. And like I've flitted between both worlds. I was, when the Haunting of Hill House came out, Mike Flanagan's series, it was, it was amazing. I binged it all, like, because obviously I had nothing else to do with my life. But, and then I think I can't remember what it was. It might have been the final season of Game of Thrones, which did the week by week and the HBO kind of style. And I was like, man, this is, it's slow, but everyone's talking about it every week. So, you kind of dialed in on the conversation, but you still don't. I don't forget about shows like Haunting of Hill House or Clickbait. Like people have that argument of if you drop it all at once, then it disappears from the conversation. But I don't really agree with that. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think that some shows affect people and have a deep impact, and others don't. So that's more to do with the show itself than the way in which it's consumed. So I would kind of say, I'm a bit agnostic, really. I can see arguments both ways.
Yeah, it's tough to be I guess 100% on each end. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just honestly, I'm just grateful to be able to make a show.
There you go. To have something to be able to deliver to audiences. Absolutely.
Look, exactly.
Talking about the show itself, it deals with quite a number of heavy themes, and it's not just a simple whodunit. It goes far beyond the premise that's sold to us in the little preview that Netflix provides. There's so much more to it. Can you talk to me about how important it was for you to balance each issue? There's so many things in there, and kind of give them all the weight that they deserve. Because I think, over 8 episodes, you got a lot more time than a feature, right? Than a feature film. So I think you guys did a fantastic job of really highlighting and putting an even amount of weight on each of the heavy themes. So how important was that for you guys in the writing process?
I think it was always a balancing act. It was a negotiation because Netflix wanted things faster, and I probably would have taken a little bit more time. And so, we just kept kind of, it was a brokering arrangement. For me, content is about what you've got to say about the world and the things that I'm interested in the show as well. I loved all the kind of whodunit and the twists and turns and the plotty element of it. But ultimately, I think that writers are generally more concerned about character and, and what you've got to say about people and theme and character and theme for me are always crucial to the work that I make. And I was really interested in this idea of how on the internet now you've got this contradiction between feeling anonymous, like feeling like you're just kind of at home behind your computer screen and, no one's looking at you or judging you, except for actually you're also in the world's biggest public square at the same time. So those two things are happening at once. And I think it can sort of do your head in a bit. And I think it can lead to all kinds of weird behaviors. And, when we were putting the show together, we sort of did some research into like a whole new category of crime that has kind of sprung up because of that contradiction, because of both the anonymity that people feel. So it allows that sort of, that sort of emotional part of your brain to sort of take over. And, and people can, be like, the whole internet mob thing, the whole, online bullying and harassment, all of those issues, which I think are real things, and you can sort of understand how people get into it. But at the same time, people feel sort of like they're sort of, protected as well in this other sort of, private space, so I think that was interesting for me. And I was also interested in all the different identities we have now, like all the different versions of ourselves that we present to the world. And, like there was a meme going around of, like, this is what your Instagram, self looks like. This is what your Facebook self looks like. This is what your Twitter self looks like, etc. This is what your LinkedIn self looks like. There's all of that. I mean, we've always had it as humans, like we've always had different versions of ourselves that we present to the world, but then now you've got even more, and it's just like I think it can be very confusing, and I think it can be psychologically quite stressful to have to negotiate all those different versions of yourself. So that were the sort of big ideas behind the show, and like we wanted to make sure that everyone in the show was in some way flawed and in some way culpable and in some way misbehaved. That was kind of like a governing principle.
Well, no, that's perfect. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I mean, one thing I love about the show is that, even the victim, Nick, in this case, played by Adrian Grenier, who's amazing, by the way. I love Entourage. I love everything Adrian's done. He isn't exactly squeaky clean, and even by the end of the show, we're still left somewhat feeling uncomfortable about his choices. How important was it for you guys to maintain those gray areas? You don't want a character that's black and white necessarily. You kind of want someone who's I don't know about that, really. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of
exactly. No, I think that there's a certain kind of drama that does sort of black and white sort of characters, that, and it's like superhero sort of stuff, or even the best superhero stuff has moral complications. Yeah. I'm sort of interested in drama that reflects the reality of the world that I live in some way or other, like even if it's kind of like a heightened form of it or a distillation of it, it's still, at the end of the day, I kind of always keep going back to what I think is true and real about the world and about people. And, what seems to be fundamentally true and real about the world is that everyone is flawed and everyone is, that it's harder for me to sort of see the world in terms of good and evil, because it's not how I experience the world. And so, all you can really do is just kind of like, well, you just reflect the world the way you experience it. And Nick is a flawed person. His wife, Sophie, is a flawed person, that they all have made mistakes. His sister, Pia, is a very flawed person. She's, the cop, Roshana Miri, who looks so like good. The good guy. Oh, I love Phoenix. He's a Melbourne actor.
Yeah,
Phoenix Ray.
I picked up on that, and let me just ask. His character's a Muslim character, right? Like, I mean, that was okay, because I'm a Muslim myself, so I was like, whoa, that is. You don't see a lot of representation like that. Speaking of Mike Flanagan, Midnight Mass just had a big like Muslim kind of character as well. So I was like totally floored by that. So thank you for that.
Good.
Really, really fantastic.
There was a really good article that talked about how great Clickbait was about Muslim representation, because, we did something which doesn't feel like rocket science to me, but actually weirdly is rarer than you would think, which is we just showed a Muslim as a normal person and as a normal human being, and like not defined by one aspect of their identity.
Thank you. Literally took the words out of my mouth. I'm so glad you didn't have this massive subplot about him going to a mosque or something like that. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he is more defined by his identity as an ambitious cop who was in the missing persons area who wanted to get into homicide. That's the thing that defines him as a character, and the contradiction of the fact that if you get into homicide, someone has to die. Like there has to be a death, and that that he didn't even quite figure that out until he experienced it. And I think that's So he's got, like his own journey, and he, like his own flaws as well. Like I think that, and the gay Korean reporter, he's a flawed character. Like everyone is grappling with the difficulty of being, like human.
No, absolutely. I think, yeah, the moral gray areas that the show really presents is fantastic. I mean, obviously with the ethical issues with the reporter, like those are, those are things that I guess we can all kind of like extrapolate in our own workplaces and things like that. So yeah, absolutely, it was fantastic. I think one of the reasons the show has really resonated so much is there's this huge focus on social media. You've talked about social media already. Whether it's YouTube or online dating apps, the show does a great job of highlighting the strength and pitfalls of social media. So when you're putting the script together for the show, where did that fascination with social media initially come from? Did you when you're putting together the script, did you have a light bulb moment where you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to write a show that's really centered around some of the dangers of social media?
I just sort of think that we were looking at the research and the real things that happen to people, and the kind of like pretty catastrophic things, the impact that things that happen online can, and the way it leaks into real life, and it can destroy lives. And I think that that's kind of, we were looking at the criminal way that was happening, but we see it on a daily basis. We see different versions of it, of the way in which things leak from the computer screen into the real world, and then the devastation that it can cause as a result of that. And so, some of the things that I was really fascinated by were the, like all of the catfishing stories, and the way in which people adopted other people's identities, identity theft as an idea. And in the original research, we were also interested in, all these suicide whisperer stories. I mean, we didn't get as dark as that because, but it certainly affected our the construction of the show. That there's all of these stories about people who talked other people into killing themselves. And that seems like that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
That's pretty
fucked up. Yeah.
And so, like in terms of bad behavior, that felt like one of the most extreme sort of areas that you could go into. I mean, there are other extreme areas that we didn't go into, but we kind of know are there on the internet, and maybe that's territory for another show or another season. We'll see.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're kind of living in a world, especially this year and late last year, second half of last year, where the internet is really dominating the way people think and feel. You've got the spread of misinformation. I've seen videos where they've been intentionally clipped to leave out, actual context that might change something, the narrative. So, I mean, I think you guys did a great job of showing just how hazardous, I mean, the social media can be. But also, telling us a fantastic story around it. So really, really appreciate it.
In some ways, it is a simple morality tale, which is just, you just don't believe everything you see on the internet. Yeah. It's really, really that simple.
Yeah.
And
I think more research. Do some more research is my. That's kind of like my mantra. do some more research before you believe it.
Yeah, and before you believe an accusation, look at who's making the accusation.
Yeah,
as well. I think that's kind of interesting. Like, look, don't make assumptions about a piece of information unless you know something about who's actually speaking. Who's saying that. because it's really easy to like we all fall into those traps, like, and there are all these things around confirmation bias. We're always looking to confirm what we already believe, like we're always looking to kind of, identify ourselves as part of a certain tribe. And then, and then because of that, tribal identification, we're all, we are all vulnerable to the rules of of being in that tribe. So, what are the rules? So that means that we don't always look very closely at at the information that we're given, and in fact, I think it's called information hygiene. I think that's the expression. I think that's one of the crucial factors in this current sort of like war of disinformation, that people aren't given the skills and training to tell the difference between good information and bad information, because it all looks the same.
No, exactly, and it's incredibly morbid to think about it. I mean, like you kind of just want to, you just kind of want there to be like a guidebook to social media, or like like a textbook, like this is how you should read things, this is how you should interpret things, but unfortunately that's not the case. Look,
Yeah.
something just as morbid that I kind of really wanted to ask you, like it's a bit of a strange question, but I'm obsessed with true crime. I'm obsessed with like this whole not really true crime, but also the fascination with true crime. There's this whole like podcast boom, the TV crime, movie, film, whatever medium you get it from. Everyone is interested in this dark element of human nature, to know more, like the curiosity of death. So, when I'm watching the trailer for Clickbait, you have this incredibly stunning and terrifying shot of Nick holding up those cards, and they're so attention grabbing, and that's the reason why both the audience on Netflix tunes in, but also the audience within the show tunes in. So what were your thoughts on the whole curiosity of true crime and death that is we're currently living through, that I don't think we've really lived through before?
I guess there, like in the original pitch for the show, one of the things I was interested in is actually an examination of how we've turned crime into entertainment, and in a way, I kind of sort of started doing that, but then in the end, the show is crime as entertainment. So like it was supposed to be a reflection of that tendency in us, and and that's certainly one of the things that is of recurring interest to me as a creator, because I have the same kind of engagement with true crime. I listen to true crime podcasts, and I think it's
Case File. Case File is my favorite. Yep.
Oh no, I don't know that one. What's that? Caswell.
Oh, it's an Australian one. It's called Case File. It's gone.
Oh, Case File. Yeah.
Pretty. Yeah, it's huge, massive.
It's good.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about it is that it's, we often listen to we often engage with stories, or we consume stories to put chaos into order. To turn things that are unknown, uncontrollable, like COVID, like the world, like climate change, like all of the various kind of issues that we're dealing with in our lives. We're trying to turn that into something that is controlled and knowable, and somehow there's something about crime where you see the worst parts of human behavior, and it's like, there by the grace of God go I, like, thank God I am not like that. And often the outcome of that crime is it's solved, or like that it is explained, it is somehow contained. Like the narrative form is all about sort of like resolution in some way.
A light has been shined on.
And I think that, yes, exactly. So I think it's the impulse is based around our need to have the inexplicable explained, to have the unconquerable conquered, and to sort of see that in some kind of narrative way, so that psychically we can kind of exist in a world where these incredibly terrible things happen, and that we just normally have no control over. So that's my kind of like 2 cents worth about why we are like that.
That's incredibly well put. That's really profound. So yeah, I appreciate that, Tony. That's awesome. I really wanted to ask you about the actual script writing process. When you're putting together a script like this with so many twists and turns, and how do you avoid potential plot holes and inconsistencies? Like, for example, like there might be a reveal in episode 8. And you need to be careful with that reveal because it may have been ruled out as impossible in an earlier episode. How do you
listen, I think we did as good of a job as I could, but there are some kind of glaring plot holes in Clickbait. It is far from perfect. But basically what you try to do is you just try to make it as reasonable as possible. Like you just try to put yourself in this position and go, what would this character, what would this human being do in this position? And that's what kind of drives the plot forward. And then you kind of, you look for the twists, but you try to ground it in, this is, you try to make it real and you try to make it twisty and new. So real and new don't always go hand in hand. They're not always comfortable. So you're just kind of like navigating this kind of maze or this pathway. I mean, for me, I've got a mathematical brain. So and probably, the thing that I did that was most useful was I used to play chess a lot when I was a kid.
Love chess.
And so it's a little bit like playing a game of chess insofar as like when, you make a move and you strategize 8 moves forward. Whenever you make a move in chess, like the really great players strategize 20 moves forward. But, I could kind of go, 4 or 5 moves forward, and that is kind of that's what you use to try to sort of go, if this happens, then that happens. And so that's what you're always doing. And then you're always going, but is that real, or is that truthful, or is that truthful to that character? Is it credible? Is it believable? So they're the 2 things that you're always kind of like going backwards and forwards on. And sometimes you get stumped and you don't, for instance, why did Nick go to Dawn and Ed's place? That's a spoiler. And, I wish I'd solved that. I didn't solve it. And, I tried to solve it. But
it's okay. It works. It works.
I think we just get there because we're just pushing in the right direction. It comes very very late. But there's stuff that happens that I sort of think, oh damn.
I mean, as you're sitting there and you're overwhelmed by the visuals and the music and everyone's acting, it's not. It's tough to. It's easy to miss. It's easy to miss things like that.
I think that every audience is different, and I think that some people, I noticed on Twitter some people picked it up and they thought it was terrible, but other people were okay about it because that everyone has their own rules of thumb and. Right. And resonances. And the thing to remember about TV or any screen-based medium or any work of art really is the work of art exists in the relationship between the audience and the thing that's on the screen. That's actually what the work is. Like without the audience, this is just a bunch of zeros and ones. It's just data, it doesn't exist. So the thing exists between you and it. And so what you bring to it as an audience member is as much as the thing in itself. So what as a creator, what I'm trying to do is make something which audience members can experience and bring their own kind of subjectivity to it, but for it still to be something that's worthwhile and, that they like and engages them, makes them think, makes them feel, like all that, that's what you try to do as a creator. But you always have to be relatively humble, because it's never just you doing it. It's you in collaboration with someone else watching it.
That's absolutely 100%. I completely agree. You already kind of answered this question, but I just kind of wanted to hone down on this. How do you gauge how many twists and turns might be too much for an audience? How do you like guess when, okay, hold on, that may be too much. That may be like, all right, I'm going to get up, I'm going to turn this off, I'm out on episode 5.
You've just got to trust your own instincts as the first audience. That there is an earlier version of this, the Clickbait story, where there was another episode at the end.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it wasn't, it wasn't on an ad. There was something else. It was someone else.
Oh, wow.
And we just got notes back from, my boss just read it and said, "Oh, that's just silly." Even though I think it was more grounded. I actually think, and so some part of me regrets not going there, but also, we didn't end up going there.
That's interesting. I thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Because in a way, it could easily have been, they could have discovered that, that Nick was being catfished by a Dawn and Ed, but didn't mean that they were the killers either.
Exactly. Like it's not exactly a 1-to-1. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one point where there wasn't 1-to-1, but
interesting.
But yeah, we decided to just pack them all together.
For sure. Tony, look, Clickbait is a work that's, partially originated in Australia. I'm not sure where your writing partner's from, so I can't really...
Christian, he's from Melbourne, yeah.
Oh, okay, so there you go. So originated in Australia, the idea, concept. So, it's very rare for something in Australia to originate as a concept and then blow up in Hollywood, blow up in, across the world. So, do you have, what's one piece of advice that you have for aspiring young Australians, Australian writers, that you might be able to impart?
I think it is that, that writing has to be an act of generosity, which is what you have to give to the audience, because and it's not an act of entitlement, it's actually an act of generosity. So it's not like an audience deserves to hear my story, why? And it's like, well, what do you have to say that will help enrich the lives of the people who watch it or listen to it? And I think that's the more that you can think like that, then the more that you have to offer. The more you have to offer, then the more chance it is that people want to take up the offer.
That's perfect.
I think that's like when you try to reduce it to its basic components, like, we're trying to say something, in a particular form, which involves, certain kinds of codes of, language and image and all that stuff. It's a particular medium, but ultimately you're just trying to say something, and people either want to hear it and it gives them something, or they don't. So you just have to be conscious of that you have something to say. Most of the time, my reminder to people who work in the area of content creation is that the key word is content. What do you have to say? And when I meet a lot of younger writers, my key piece of advice is, well, what do you have to say, and why? In saying it, what are you offering me? as someone who is going to receive that piece of, story, narrative, information.
That's perfect. I think it's incredible. It's really helpful to remind yourself that it's important to stay humble. That you are giving something to people and not them taking something from you.
Absolutely, and I think it's it's particularly worth remembering in my particular field because people blow a lot of smoke up your ass and they can sort of say you're amazing and all these things. They can make you feel as though you're more special than either. You have to have self-belief to have a career, in this industry because it's very, very competitive. But you have to have other things as well. You have to have, and I think you have to have a sense of how important your collaborators are and how important your audience is. Both of those things I think are really important.
Definitely. Tony, what's on the horizon for you? What do you have coming up next? Can we expect a follow up to this, to Clickbait? What's happening on your end?
Well, Clickbait was my first attempt at a murder mystery, like this kind of whodunit, and I think I sort of discovered that I've got, very late in life, I've learned that I have a particular penchant for it. Like I like doing this kind of stuff. Like I've done a lot of more sort of social justice based work in the past. Like a lot of my work has been around representation and around different kinds of issues. And Clickbait kind of is more disguised. Like I think there are issues in there, but it's more wrapped up in entertainment, and I kind of like that. So I suspect I'm probably going to steer that path, navigate that path for a while.
Beautiful.
And try to have fun. Everything you make is difficult. Like every single thing I've ever made has its attendant issues because you can't put a whole bunch of human beings together, without some issue or other arising. And every time you do it, you learn something new about, the human beings that you're working with. But I do feel as though, increasingly, as I reach, a certain end of my career, a certain part of my career, which is towards the, I can see the finish line, that I work in an industry that is very resource heavy, that consumes a lot of resources to make, 45 minutes on the screen, bite times 8 episodes or whatever, and that we live in a very resource scarce world. So whatever you do, whatever choices you make about what you're going to make, they have to be worthwhile. They have to be kind of, to a purpose. And so, a really valuable purpose for what you do is to engage and entertain people and give them, how else, we've all spent so much time in COVID talking about what TV shows we're watching.
Exactly. And I think it's you say that, it has to be worthwhile. And I think Clickbait 100% was. I mean, not only did we spend the time on the couch watching the series and thinking about everything that you're putting on screen, but we spend a lot of time talking about it to different people. And I think
that's fantastic.
Yeah, communication and getting other people's thoughts and opinions is incredibly important in this post-COVID world that we're living in. So,
but also in a very divided world, I think that one of the things that drama can do is it can give people from very different points of view and very different worlds something common to talk about. And if they both, if they both love it, it shows you that there is something in a shared humanity that is kind of worthwhile, even if it's only for the smallest moment, even if it's 10 seconds of we both loved this show, therefore we both have some register of human emotion which is compatible, and that's sometimes that's really worth remembering.
Worth yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's really worth remembering because I feel like we live in such a divided world, and the whole project of drama is it's a humanist project. It's about remembering and reinforcing our connections as human beings.
It's incredibly well put, Tony. Incredibly well put. One last question. This is one that I ask all of my guests.
Yes.
And this is always the fun one. Our podcast is called Midnight Double Feature. You have a Sunday to yourself, no obligations, nothing. What 2 movies do you put on back to back?
Oh my God. Maybe just because I saw someone raise it recently. The Last Picture Show is one of them.
Nice.
Peter Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most influential films that I've ever seen. And then the other one would be The Graduate. Mike Nichols.
Fantastic. Nice.
That would be my double feature.
That's an
because, like I saw both of those films when I was young. They both profoundly affected me, and were part of me wanting to be a filmmaker.
That's amazing. It's actually kind of like weirding me out that you mentioned Peter Bogdanovich, because I'm going through a Sopranos rewatch after the Many Saints of Newark. So I'm just because he starred in that, he directed some episodes of that. So it's weirding me out that you just mentioned Peter Bogdanovich. I was just like,
it's slightly random as well, because we haven't heard from him for a long time.
Exactly. But look, Tony, thank you so much for joining us here at Midnight Double Feature. This has been amazing, and really,
it's a pleasure. And you're such a great interviewer. It's just been so much fun.
Thank you so much, Tony. I mean, thank you for Clickbait. Number one. I mean, I think I'm not just like you said, blowing smoke up your ass. It was genuinely an entertaining show from start to finish, and in a moment when people really needed it. And I can't speak for anyone else in other countries, but here in New South Wales, absolutely, because it came to us when we were. It
was a pretty shit time, wasn't it?
It was such a shit time. This haircut, I immediately went to get a haircut this morning because I needed to do something.
Good on you. Well, I hope you're enjoying the change that's coming to New South Wales, and I'm really looking forward to that happening in Victoria.
I hope so soon. But look, Tony, thank you so much again for joining us. And you have an open invite anytime to join us on the show to talk about anything.
Absolutely. Well, next time I make something, we'll have another chat.
Doesn't even have to be a future project. Just join us to just shoot the shit. Who cares?
It's a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Have a great afternoon.